All right, guys, part 3 of these Sony, uh, big Sony floor speaker rebuild. Uh, Part 3 is going to be crossovers, and then what I've done to get the information I need to redo the crossovers. Ignore the indoor-outdoor carpet on each side of the mid and tweeter. I just put them there temporarily to see how they affect the measurements by having those on the front baffle, since these drivers are centered. I believe it can cause some sort of a front baffle diffraction issues or something. So haven't measured it. I just stuck them on there. I haven't got to actually measure them with it on there to see if it makes any difference. But we'll get right into it. What I'm doing with the crossover, what I'm doing with these speakers, probably the first time through, is I replaced the woofers because the original ones were shot, and the crossovers that come in these are right here. We got one of them. These dinky little, basically low frequency stoppers. There's just a cap, one cap on the mid, and one cap on the mid and one cap on the tweeter. And then the cap on the mid is just blocking frequencies below, I don't know, I don't remember what these were, below a certain range. And then the other cap was blocking frequency below another range. Actually, let me go get my notes. Well, I looked it up. I figured out what the caps were filtering at. Okay, got my notes. Originally, they were crossed at 6K and 18K. And then the woofer, like a lot of these cheap speakers, the woofer has nothing on it. It's completely relying on physics to basically have once it gets to a certain point, physics are going to take over, and it's going to act like a very long sloping, crossover. The woofer is only going to go so high, and it's just going to run out. Apparently, the woofer, couldn't test the original woofers because the surrounds on them were completely shot. Otherwise, I would have tested them to kind of see how far up they're running. But apparently, I'm going to guess the original woofers, they were probably getting up to around 6 or 8K out of them. So which is really high for a 10-inch woofer like this. So that's why the cap on the mid is blocking everything roughly. Very, very, this would be a first order, I believe. Everything below 6K. And then the mid after that is allowed to run as high as it wants. And then on the tweeter, another cap, which was blocking everything below 18K. So the mid was they did that because this mid is apparently capable of going up to 18K. So, and then the tweeter was blocking everything below 18K. So the tweeter was literally left with 18K to 20K, which is pretty much nothing. Most adults cannot hear 18 to 20K. So what that tweeter's doing in their original design is not even audible. It's practically just there so they can call it a three-way almost, and it just looks more speakers. It's like the 70s almost. There's still kind of there's still like a 70s influence there, where 3 speakers is better than 2. It's big, so it's got to have 3. Got it. But yeah, the tweeter in this scenario, the way it was set up, was pretty much doing nothing. It was effectively a 2-way with a 10 and a giant tweeter, aka mid. I wanted to figure out what frequency range. I already knew what this one, because it's listed on Parts Express and I can measure it. But I wanted to know what these two were capable of. So when I redo the crossover for these, they need a much more suitable crossover points. So what I did is I just took my my Dayton mic here. I'll link it in the description if you want to buy one from Parts Express. I think it's the UMM6 USB mic. But I went through, and what I did is this is all very rough. I will probably do a second round of try to get more accurate, more detailed, and really dial in these speakers. But this is just going to be, I'm doing this very quick and simple, so almost anybody can do it. And most people are not going to be able to do this next step without a calibrated microphone. But I just wanted to get an idea of roughly the frequency range these two speakers could handle. So I just unhooked all the speakers inside, set the calibrated mic in front of the mid, directly lined up with the center of the mid, about a foot away. Used RU to do a frequency sweep from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. And then I did the same thing with the tweeter. I unhooked the mid and only left the tweeter plugged in. Did another sweep just so I could chart or see in RU roughly what frequency range these speakers were working at. And the tweeter came back. I just wrote down at 1 foot. It was roughly 5,000 hertz to 20,000 hertz, which makes sense for a little. I think it's a 2-inch paper tweeter. And then the mid range at 1 foot was 1,000 hertz to 18,000 hertz, which also makes sense. So the crossovers, I didn't want to go. I wanted to go as low as I could on the mid range because I didn't want the 10-inch woofer having to go any higher than it needed to. So the woofer is, I changed it and the woofer is crossed over to the mid at 1,500 hertz now, and the mid crosses over to the tweeter at 12,000 hertz. So I felt that's a pretty comfortable range for this mid range, given that it's roughly operating in 1,000 to 18,000 hertz. I felt having it run 1,500 hertz up to 12,000 would be fine. It's well within its range of being comfortable. And then that leaves the tweeter only has to do 12,000 and up, which is still going to be super easy for that tweeter. But it also keeps the woofer crossing the mid-range over as low as possible. I don't. This 10-inch isn't too bad from Parts Express. I just didn't want to have to cross over any higher than it needed to, because I think a lot of those frequencies, once you get beyond 1,500 hertz, the mid-range is going to be better at it than the 10. I don't know. So hopefully this new crossover will be a better start. Down the road, 8 more time, I can measure all 3 drivers, get all the parameters on them, and take all this data and information, collect up all this data and information, and put it into something like Basebox Pro and Xover Pro, and get into a much more in-depth crossover. I'm just trying to do something super basic right now with them, just to make an improvement over basically the way they come. And a lot of that, if the 10-inch original drivers weren't shot, I probably would have left them in there, and the biggest improvement would have been reinforcing the cabinets. A lot of these big cabinets like this are just big, hollow, empty, thin-walled cabinets, and one of the best things you can do for them that almost anybody can do if you got some scrap wood and wood glue laying around is to get inside them. And I'm sure it wasn't my last video where you can see all the bracing and stuff I put inside of them, and get some binding posts and put some little bit of acoustic foam or damping or something in there. That alone should make a pretty big difference, and it should be really inexpensive to do and pretty easy to do. This step is going to get a little more complicated because, again, the only way you're going to know the operating range of these drivers is to be able to somewhat measure them, and then from there use an online crossover calculator to punch in some numbers like I did here, just switching from a 6,000 and 18,000 to a 1,500 and 12,000 crossover, and then it'll spit out some numbers for the capacitors and resistors you need. Yeah, a lot of times I just go here. We're gonna focus on the PC screen now. I'll go to this website, get you a little closer here. DIY audio and video. Over here, we'll go to the 3-way APC crossover. And then to get the actual ohms of each driver, I took the tweeter and the mid-range out and just used a multimeter like this, set to resistance or ohms, and measured them. And if I remember right, I don't remember exactly, is it written down here? No, it's not written down, but if I remember right, the tweeter was like 9.1 ohms. The mid-range was, I think, 8.9. Then the woofer, if I remember right, was 7.5 or something. And that's just It's listed on Parts Express, and I just measured it anyway myself real quick. And then on the low end, I did 1500. That's I didn't want to go too low with the mid because the mid was only working down to about 1000. I didn't want to push it too close to its bottom, so I figured 1500 is a pretty safe low. And then with the I don't know if this is 8 to 3 octaves. The split is 1500 to 12,000. If you change it to 10, 3.4, then it's 1200 to 12,000. I don't remember what this means because I don't do three-way crossovers very often. I don't remember. Yeah, almost everything I've built has all been two-way. If you remember what this means, or if you're watching Toyd, you can put it in the comments. I don't remember what the frequency spread is. And then there's your bandpass gain. Your bandpass would be your mid-range section of the crossover. I did a 0 bandpass gain because I just did a first order. If you go to like a second order, and then it will start to add gain for your bandpass. The higher the order, a little bit more gain you're going to need. But since I'm doing a first order, it says I don't need any gain. The only thing I'm having an issue with that I have to recalculate for is what I don't have a way to necessarily find out is the efficiency of each driver. Like the woofer, the 10-inch woofer I got, like on Parts Express, I think it says it's like a 86 dB per 1 watt sensitivity. The mid-range and the tweeter in these, I have no idea what sensitivity they are. But just by listening to them, the mid-range I'm going to guess is probably around 90. It is definitely louder than the woofer, and I'd say the woofer I think is around 86. The mid-range I'm going to guess is at least 90 dB sensitivity, and the tweeter is probably like 87 or 89. So I don't have a way to measure it exactly, but to kind of even that out to get all the drivers to the same sensitivity, I'm gonna have to build L pads for the mid-range and tweeter to kind of pull them back to match the woofer. Otherwise, they're gonna always noticeably overpower the woofer, and that's what I got now. The crossovers in them are done with this setup with these components, and they already sound better than they did stock, but the mid-range especially is definitely brighter than the tweeter and the woofer. So I have to figure out some sort of I could probably just ballpark it. Actually, let me look and see in DATs, because I did run them in DATs, but I couldn't get a good reading on, I think it was the tweeter, or no, it was the mid-range. All I could get it, for some reason, all I could get it to read was the ohms, the hertz, or what was that, the free air, or FS, read at 742, so not too much under 1,000. I went with 1,000 when I ran it through Rue, because just watching the curve drop off, once it gets down so many decibels, it's no good. So I rounded it just up to 1,000, but according to this, it's 742. But yeah, all the Q measurements did not come out. The LE, which is I think just the voice coil inductance, but still. But now when I ran the tweeter in here, in that, I got a lot more information here. I still do not have a sensitivity, but I did get all the Q measurements, so that'll help when doing a little bit more involved crossover for these. I'm gonna have to try some other things to get a better reading on the mid-range, so I'll definitely need more of this information to build better crossovers for these, because I am kind of curious to see if I can get good data on these drivers and really fine-tune the crossovers, how far I can get with them. But right now, this is just a simple, and there's quite a few of these Sony SS U541s out there. Yeah, the only thing I did here that I don't know if anyone could do is measure the driver's frequency range. You would need the USB calibrated microphone, which is not too big of a deal. I think they're like $70. It's not a huge deal. And then combined with Rue, you can do a lot of stuff with it. So to me, it was easily worth the $70. But this is where I landed so far. Just a simple crossover right now because it's anything is better than what it came with, pretty much. So we'll pop one of the woofers out so you can see the crossover in it. All right, there's the crossover. I just moved the camera down to the floor and popped one of the 10-inch woofers out. But this is the basic crossover now. Get a little closer here so you can see the way these come together. I did find my printout here. The way these come together, all the negatives, you can see all the negatives just daisy chained together, and then the positives, it comes in and it just splits off to each component. So I just took all the negatives come together right here in the middle. And that's the black wire. It's the negative for all the components, and then the red that comes in from the terminals in the back all comes together right here, and then one goes to the woofer, one goes to the mid-range, and these go up to the tweeter. So you can see where, and this is underneath this twist is the wires are twisted and all soldered together. This cap is just on there so they don't touch anything and short out. But yeah, like I said, the power and ground come in, or power and ground, the positive and neutral, or positive and negative come in from the binding post, and the grounds all come together here, and one ground goes to each speaker, and then the negative or the positive comes in here and splits off, goes to the tweeter circuit, or we'll say mid-range, and then to the woofer. And I just did it that way because it seemed like a lot of the vintage speakers I've worked on and repaired, their networks are kind of done this way, and it's just easier than doing a long time ago. I used to just do them exactly how the picture showed. You know, I would splice a negative, you know, for each one of these came back, I'd splice them together, and instead it's just easier to, you know, connect all the grounds together, and then have all the reds or all the positives kind of just feed from the same place. I don't know how to word it. Everybody kind of does it their own way. So, but it makes for a pretty simple, easy, clean crossover. Now, if I add L pads to kind of pull back the mid-range and tweeter, the L pad, which is just going to be a bank of resistors in series parallel, is not going to be on the crossover. I'll just hot glue them to the back of the mid-range and tweeter, so, which is fine. It's always those can easily be added as an afterthought. So, but yeah, this is where I've landed so far. So my problem with getting this stuff done is I got so much other stuff to do. I work long hours in the summer, but then in the winter I'm pretty much laid off all winter, so I have a lot more time to do this kind of stuff in the winter. But between working long hours, trying to do family stuff in the summer, trying to start on remodeling a house and everything, it's just everything gets so scattered and I get so busy. I have very little time for each and every little thing. So yeah, a lot of this stuff gets pushed aside, and it takes a while for me to get back to it sometimes. But this is what they are for now. They're going to sit this way for now. I got to get the resistors ordered. I think I'm going to start by... This is the way they're going to sit for now. I haven't really taken the time to try to figure out a way, or maybe I'm just not thinking of it, to measure the tweeter and the mid to get a rough idea of their sensitivity so I can kind of more accurately order the resistors I need, or build the right size L pads for the mid-range and tweeter. If you know of any ways to measure a speaker to find out its sensitivity, put it in the description. Otherwise, probably just going to go by ear. Maybe start with bringing the mid and tweeter each down 3 dB, and start there and see how it sounds, and then measure it. Resistors aren't really that expensive, so I don't know. I'll figure something out. But this is the way this is where we're at now. They're gonna stay this way for now. And I'm yeah. Next step will be figuring out the L pads, and then kind of seeing where that lands once I get them evened out, see how good they sound, and then going back and gathering up all the data I need to put into Basebox Pro and Xover Pro to build a much more complex crossover network for these. And then also doing measurements of this woofer in this box and everything. And just, yep, it's a lot of, it can be a lot of work, I guess. Just depends how much time you have. I don't always have a lot of time, so. Well, anyways, once I get to the next step of these, or whatever I'm going to do next on these, it'll be just another part 4. This, they'll all be put into a playlist, so eventually we'll get them done. It's just they're not a main focus right now. They're more a side project. I'm just doing a little bit on here and there, so stay tuned. Videos, more and more videos will be coming along as I get time to work on them. So thanks for watching. Good night, guys.